Edward is a California police officer. One day during his duty, a truck passes beside him, and the young girl in the car throws down her doll. He picks up the doll on her behalf and signals for her mother to stop. So he takes it to them. While the mother apologizes for the act of her daughter and says they are in the middle of relocating and the young girl has been behaving irrationally, the girl only asks him for his doll without a thank you. She collects it from him and tells him she's bored. He tries to cheer her up, but she throws the doll outside the window again. As he goes to the road to take it, the trailer drives toward their truck and hits them. The car explodes immediately, so Edward tries to break the window at the back to help the little girl out. But the girl refuses to take it before the truck completely explodes and throws Edward off. Edward is traumatized by the event. He takes a break from work and he stays at home on drugs. He receives a visit from a colleague at work and he invites her inside the house. She brings along with her several get-well-soon letters Edward had received from the office and tells him Pete asked her to drop them off. He feels she is uncomfortable visiting him, so he tells her she can leave, and she leaves after staying for a while. After she leaves, he takes the letter to read them, and among them, he finds one that has been written to him by his ex-fiancée, Willow. She apologizes for the way things ended between them. In fact, she says that she knows she was the one that ended things badly. She apologizes for reaching out to him in this manner, but she doesn't have a choice because she needs his help. She says she has a daughter, Rowan, and she attached Rowan's picture to the letter. She tells him Rowan has been missing for about 2 weeks, and she has done everything in her power to find her. She claims she stays on a private island near Summers Isle, where she was born. She says Rowan couldn't have left the island on her own, and the authorities over there aren't ready to help her out. So she needs his help. He immediately reaches Summers Isle and gets the address. Then he goes to work, where he asks Pete if he knows who dropped the letter in the office. Here says he doesn't know, so he shows Pete the letter. And Pete advises that since Willow left him despite their engagement, he doesn't have to respond to the call. He claims Edward should tell her to call the girl's father for help, but Edward insists she might have called him because he is a police officer, and he thinks it is his place to do something. Pete insists he should at least call Willow first, but Edward informs him there is no network coverage in Summers Isle. The following day, Edward starts his journey to the island in a boat. He keeps seeing several imaginations, and when he comes down from the boat, he sees a harbor. He asks the driver if he knows Summers Isle. The man tells him he knows the place and that is where he makes all his deliveries. He asks if the man could drive him there, but the man says no. He asks if the man can drive him across the river instead, but the man says no. He tells Edward it's a private island, and no one is allowed to go there without an invitation. Eventually, Edward offers the man some money, and he decides to take him there. Edward arrives at the island, and he looks around. An older woman calls out for him, asking him if he has lost his way, and he tells her, saying no. 2 other women comes to him, and he sees 2 men carrying dripping leather. The woman asks him how he had gotten there and reminds him they are on a private island where visitors aren't accepted. He says he was invited. He shows them Rowan's picture and asks them if they know the girl, but they all claim they have never seen her. He asks them if they know Willow, and they admit to knowing Willow and tell him Willow is at the meeting house. He calls their attention to the dripping leather, and when they open it for him to check, he sees it moving and just walks away. The ladies tell him Rowan isn't Willow's daughter. He goes to the meeting house where he meets the attendant, Sister Beach, and asks for a room and meal. Willow enters too, and Beach asks Willow to take him to his room upstairs. He's anxious to follow her, so he requests a drink, and after drinking, he announces to them that he is there on official business as police. Beach reminds him that he is a California police officer, whereas they are at Washington, but he claims the issue of a missing child doesn't deal with jurisdictions. He goes to his room where Willow gives him a paper telling him where to meet her. He meets her there later and she apologizes for running away and says it was because she was scared. She appreciates him for coming and begs him to find her child because he's the only one she trusts. He returns to the inn where he sees some ladies asking for Sister Summers Isle, and Beach tells them they should prepare for the day after tomorrow, where the Wicker Man will arrive. He gets severe nightmares that night and sees Rowan walking after he wakes. He follows her into the forest, where he also falls after the building he found collapses. The following day, he sees some photos of a festival, and he asks Beach when they do the festival. She tells him it is at the end of autumn. He asks one of the inn workers about Rowan, and the lady doesn't reply. He even asks her what happens the day after tomorrow, and she doesn't give a definite response. He goes to the school and asks the teacher Rose about Rowan, but the teacher says the girl doesn't exist. He asks his fellow students too, and they deny knowing her, but he finds her name canceled in the school's register. Rose takes him outside to explain that Willow is grieving, and they don't use the word death in their city. When he asks how Rowan died, she says she will burn to death. When she realizes he found the tenses in her word, she changes it to she burned to death, and she is buried behind the church. He goes to the church where he indeed finds a grave. He meets Willow there and she insists her child isn't dead. She claims everyone blamed her child for what's happening in their city, and she confesses that Rowan is Edward's daughter. She takes him to the last place she sees Rowan, and she also mentions that Dr. Moss takes their picture every year. Edward goes to the river to find the harbor driver, but the man isn't there. He imagines Rowan drowning, and he returns to reality. He goes to check the harbor, but no one is there. On his way, he stops at Dr. Moss's place and asks her questions about the annual harvest festival, but she refuses to say much and says it's ancient history. After she leaves, he breaks into her house and reads the book about it, where he finds out Rowan is their worst harvest. And she was also involved in the festivals, for the festival is done by burning. He returns to confront Willow, asking her what she isn't saying. She claims she knows little about the festival and says it's just a community story. He tries to get angry with her, but she pleads for his sympathy, and he hugs and kisses her. He asks another villager who refuses to answer, and on his way he gets attacked by bees and faints. He wakes some days later at Summer's Isle home. He goes to meet her, and she explains that their ancestors left humanity due to persecution. They stayed on their own by breeding special children, which Edward assumes means female. He asks her what they do if a person gave birth to a male, but she refuses to answer. She tells him they don't murder there, and no one murders Rowan. He dug out the grave and found but bits of burnt doll inside it. He hears a child's voice and chases it until he falls into a well of dirty water and finds it difficult to leave. He screams and Willow comes to his rescue. He asks who burnt the doll, but she doesn't have an answer, so he asks her to hide in the house. He goes to Summer's Isle house and calls out for her, but while opening the door he sees a girl that bees has covered, so he runs. He keeps looking for Rowan among the kids and sees several unspeakable things. He goes to meet the men to help him, but none of them respond to him. While chasing, he sees Rose, who says they are preparing for a festival, and some women who see him and say he is he. On the day of the festival, he disguises himself like a bear and follows them for the festival. He sees them celebrating the sacrifice of Rowan, who was hung on the tree. Upon seeing that, he runs to loosen her from the tree and carries her into the forest. In the forest, he receives a call from Pete, but can't communicate with him. As he runs with Rowan, the girl returns to Willow, asking her if she did well. Edward returns with a gun and the sisters surround him. He asks Willow what is happening, and they explain that they all wrote the letter to invite him because they need someone to sacrifice to the Wicker Man. Someone distant but also connected to them, and his fate was sealed when Willow chose him. Summer's Isle tells him that Willow is her daughter, and they have been having a failed harvest and need a human sacrifice, which is why they have invited him. He tries to shoot at them, but Willow reveals she has taken his bullets. They surround him and carry him in the leather sack. They tie him up and throw him into the Wicker Man. Rowan takes a wood of fire and sets the Wicker Man on fire. 6 months later, Willow and Honey are seen in the city at a club where they decide to follow two men home.